In this video, we are going to learn how to graph square root functions. So first, let's make a table of values to learn what a square root graph looks like. So when I'm picking x values for my table, I want to put perfect squares in as my x values. So the smallest perfect square is actually 0. And then if I take the square root of 0, I get 0. Then my next perfect square is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. Next perfect square is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. Then we have 9. Square root of 9 is 3. 16, and the square root of 16 is 4. So let's plot these points. So 0, 0, 1, 1, 4, 2, and then the other last two won't fit, but that's okay, because we can still get a general idea of the shape of this graph. So the domain for this graph, well, is again all of our x values. So if I'm looking at the domain of this graph, it starts here and goes here. So it's starting at 0 and then going to infinity. And actually it's the same with the range. It's starting at 0 and going to positive infinity. All right, now let's look at square root functions where we have transformations. So we've done transformations with absolute value functions. So now we're going to look at them with square root functions. So if I have a plus or minus in the front, a minus in the front means it's reflected. So that means instead of going up, it would go down like this. Plus means left on the inside, minus means right on the inside. Plus on top on the outside, minus is down on the outside. So let's look at this first graph. So I have a minus 2 on the inside. That means this is going right 2. And I have a plus 3 on the outside, so that means it's going up 3. Now, I'm going to use my same points from the table up here. So I'm going to use these points. I'm going to copy them down into this table. So 0, 0, 1, 1, 4, 2. Now I'm going to plot these points, and then I'm going to transform them. So I'm going to plot 0, 0, 1, 1, 4, 2. But now I'm going to move all of those points right 2 and then up 3. So starting at 0, 0, if I go right 2, up 3, it would be right there. Starting at this 1, 1, if I went right 2, up 3, it'd be right there. And then this 4, 2, if I went right 2, up 3, it'd be right here. So the graph of this function is my red one. So I just moved those points to the transformation. So what were my transformations? They were right 2, up 3. Now, what's the domain for this graph? Well, my domain is the x. So again, my graph starts here and goes here. So the x that it starts at is positive 2, and it's still going towards infinity. So it's going to be 2 to infinity. My range, again, the graph starts here, but now we're looking at the y value. So the y value starts at 3, and then it's going to infinity for the range also. So it's going to be 3 to infinity. All right, I copied the transformations over on here because now we have a negative in front. So now this is going to reflect over the y-axis. And actually, I can just write it right here. Reflect over the y-axis. And I'm going to copy those same numbers that I had in my other table into this table, and then I'm just going to reflect them all over the y-axis. So if I plot those points, now they're going to reflect over the y. Oh, sorry, I meant x-axis. I apologize. The x-axis. So let's reflect them. So 0, 0 is not going to reflect, so it's actually just going to stay. If I reflect this one over, it's going to end up here. And if I reflect this one over the axis, it's going to end up here. And so my graph will look like that. So what are the domain and range for this graph? Well, domain, it's still starting at 0, and then it's still going to the right, meaning if it's going to the right, it's going to positive infinity. So my domain is similar to the first graph we did, where it's going to be 0 to infinity. Now the range is going to be slightly different. So it is still starting at 0, but now instead of going up, which is going towards positive infinity, now this graph is going down, meaning it's going towards negative infinity for the y. So my range is actually negative infinity to 0 because it's going negative and then the highest point it reaches is 0. So that's a little bit funky. Oh, and this should be a square bracket. All right, let's write equations for these graphs. So I'm really going to be using this format that I have up here. And so I want to put a number on the inside for left or right, and then a number on the outside for up or down. So let's first look at this graph. So this graph from 0, 0, it went left 4. So that means on the inside of the square root, I'm going to have x plus 4. It didn't move up or down at all, so I don't have anything after the square root, so that's the equation of this graph. For this graph, from 0, 0, this graph went right 1, up 2. So that means on the inside of my square root, I'm going to have an x minus 1 to represent right 1. And then on the outside, I'm going to have plus 2.